Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. As always, on this end of week preview show, I am Josh Norris, joined by John Daigle, Hayden Winks, and pseudo-celebrity Patrick Doherty. Gentlemen, how are we?
Very good. This year, the hack, do not shoot short side on FIFA like last year. You got to go to the far side this year.
I appreciate that, Pat. Thank you for that note. Daigle, once again, I need to turn to you because I know that you work a lot in football. That consumes your work life. It also consumes your personal life at the moment, your home life at the moment. You are surrounded by a football brain in Evan Silva. Has there been any attempt to break that football bubble? And if so, how are you spending your time?
For the record, I realize I'm living with the GOAT, but this is a football brain as well. Let's give myself a little tiny bit of credit. Having said that, no, we take our time. I cook dinners still, made a nice steak with garlic and rosemary and grass-fed butter the other night. And then, also I made some El Pastor tacos with a pineapple and corn tomatillo that he absolutely loved. So that's kind of how we spend. We cook. We talk football over dinner and then go back down to the basement and talk more football while working.
Share a few bottles of Reds.
Yeah, Hayden,
a few bottles is a good estimate. Yeah.
Hayden, if I weren't mistaken, it kind of sounds like Evan has hired a personal chef.
That's right. Those tacos sound pretty good, though.
I do have a passion, though, for cooking. That's the thing. I love doing that in season and out of season. That's like the one escape I get, even though I usually put on football podcasts while cooking. So it's really no escape. I'm an idiot.
All right. Well, before we get too serious, let's jump into this week's games. Again, this is going to be our Week 6 preview show. I do want to remind you that every single Sunday, noon Eastern, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Periscope, on 12 other different platforms, it is Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. We're on there for 45 minutes just before kickoff, answering your start-sit questions, and it has gotten crazy the last 2 weeks based on players getting injured, based on COVID, and I'm sure that will be the exact same thing this Sunday, so be sure to join us. All right, gentlemen, let's start this week with the Chicago Bears, the 4-1 Chicago Bears, traveling to the Carolina Panthers. Even at home, the Panthers 3-2 are 1.5-point home favorites here. Hayden Winks. What do we make of the Bears? Do we believe that this team is really 4-1, and apparently Vegas does not?
Yeah, I mean, they're an okay team. I think they'll probably get into the playoffs still just with the expanded playoff structure this year. But I think Nick Foles is still having his moments. It's basically just an Allen Robinson offense for the Chicago Bears. I'm not expecting that many points this week for this game. These offenses are 22nd in pace and 28th in pace. Both of them are projected for about 20 points this week. So I think Allen Robinson, David Montgomery are the guys on the Bears. And then there's basically the target tree is dwindled down for the Panthers as well. So we already know who to target there too.
David Montgomery is actually in a RB1 spot all of a sudden against this Panthers front seven we're attacking. He actually outscored Ronald Jones last week, even though Ronald Jones was the one with 100 yards. Because without Tariq Cohen the past two games, not only has Montgomery played 83% of the team snaps, but he's also seen 14 targets in those games. So better opportunity overall. I absolutely love David Montgomery this week against the Panthers front seven that will be without K'Wan Short and perhaps Brian Burns as well.
We've heard this before, haven't we, Pat?
It's just hard to love someone who looked. I mean, it was against a very, very tough run defense last week in the Bucs, and it's nice to get the 6 catches back-to-back weeks. But I mean, we're talking about the eye test. David Montgomery just failed it spectacularly again last week. It has most of he just looked so bad. I don't know what was different, but last week he just looked noticeably bad last week. Like him trying to make moves in the open field, I was just like, I'm out on this guy. I mean, not that I was ever in. But, I'm like officially out. It is all about role, and he's got the role. And this Panthers, this run defense is one of the 3 or 4 worst in the NFL. So I won't begrudge anyone ranking David Montgomery as an RB1 this week. I'm not, but the argument is there. But and they have to lean on David Montgomery too. Nick Foles, when we're talking about looking bad in Week 5 against the Bucs, and the Panthers' pass defense kind of underrated, keeping everything underneath. The case makes perfect sense, but man, the player.
Yeah, Allen Robinson masks a lot of mistakes. And, since Nick Foles came into that ball game and had that incredible comeback against the Falcons. He's faced the Indianapolis Colts, which a lot of people think is a top 5 defense in the NFL. He's faced the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who a lot of people think is a top 5 defense in the NFL. The Panthers, while they have exceeded our expectations, are certainly not a top 5 defense in the NFL. But I actually want to flip to the other side, because even the questions we do have about the 4-1 Bears offensively, defensively, this is still their identity. And while Hakeem Hicks might not be quite as good as he has been in the past, or Roquan Smith, he can keep going down the list. The guy who's really turned it on is Khalil Mack. Yet, I think that Joe Brady understands that. Joe Brady is much more knowledgeable about football than I am. So is Teddy Bridgewater. I am not concerned at all about this Panthers offense. Now, time to throw Hayden might be cut much shorter than it has been in the past, but this is an offense that we know can create open receivers in the short to intermediate game and run the football with Mike Davis, who has emerged as one of the best running backs statistically in the NFL in his short time as a starter.
Yeah, that pressure off the edge is probably good news for Mike Davis and Robbie Anderson, who are the check down options in this offense. Same with Curtis Samuel, but just to a way lesser extent. DJ Moore is still being used downfield. His target share is not on the same level playing field as Robbie Anderson. The good news with DJ Moore is he's been very efficient, 10.3 yards per target. So that's why he can stay in the wide receiver 3 mix, even though that his usage doesn't quite live up to that. But we know Robbie Anderson's kind of teetering on like wide receiver 1 value. He has wide receiver 5 overall fantasy usage. According to my model, I would temper expectations just because it's the Bears. They play slow. The defense is good. But I would still be ranking Robbie Anderson inside my top 15.
Just a real quick Bears statistic. They're allowing the league low completion percentage against of 57.4. So quite
and the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's why you're still playing the guys with the floors. Like you're not benching Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Mike Davis because of matchup. But I would easily get off Teddy Bridgewater this week.
Interesting. Let's go on over to the Cincinnati Bengals going to the Indianapolis Colts. Colts are 8-point favorites, a total of 46.5 in this one. The Colts are 3-2. The Bengals still 1-3-1. Pat, the Colts are kicking, way too many field goals. And we're also coming off a week of, I wouldn't say speculation, but maybe suggestion that is Phillip Rivers the right fit for this team. Yet they land in this spot that has been a great get-right spot for many others against this lowly Cincinnati Bengals team, and especially defensively.
The Rivers pick 6 last week was kind of the most like a fan won a contest and got to come on the field and throw a pass interception of the year I've seen from any quarterback so far. The arm just might be shot. And, the Bengals on paper, this is a good matchup, but I just watched the Bengals last week hold Lamar Jackson in check. And part of that is maybe just Lamar's struggles, but this might not just be like I don't know if there's anything as like a get right blow up spot for Phillip Rivers right now. He's basically producing like just north of Daniel Jones. I think he has like 4 or 5 total touchdowns, and the supporting cast has been so hollowed out. They found a new weapon in Mo Ali Cox, and yet now he's the number 3 tight end. He's running like 3 routes a game, and you see Cincinnati, and it'll probably be a decent low-end QB2 day for Phillip Rivers. But I don't know. I see this defense. They got Geno Atkins back last week, and they gave Lamar Jackson a hard time. And it's hard to manufacture reasons for enthusiasm for Phillip Rivers in Superflex leagues.
Everyone is just curious when Jonathan Taylor, more importantly, is going to bounce back.
Tell me about it.
Well, although game script suggests this is another one where Jonathan Taylor should be great, especially because the Bengals just put DJ Reader on IR and Geno Atkins only was available for 19 snaps last week. So it's a great matchup for Jonathan Taylor, but the issue is the guy is literally mirroring basically Nyheim Hines in yards after contact per attempt, 2.15 to 2.19, and has only avoided 10 tackles on 89 touches all year long. He just looks like he's still getting his feet wet against league competition. So although I'm still high on playing him because he should receive the bulk of the work as he's still done these past few games while struggling, the issue is he's definitely struggling.
Yeah, he's an RB2 right now. He keeps getting ranked as an RB1, I feel like, but he's an RB2.
Yeah, but I think he does have running back 1 upside. I'm not sure you can say that with a lot of those running back 2s. Joe Burrow, Hayden, was completely overwhelmed last week, completely overmatched. This whole Cincinnati offense they basically kicked a field goal at the end to not put up a goose egg. I think the Colts defense can do the exact same thing as what the Ravens did last week. And I kind of funneled in to figure out, and there's many things wrong with this Bengals offense, but one in particular, Hayden, just 3.6% of the Bengals offensive plays have gained 20 or more yards this year. Is there any concern that Joe Burrow just can't throw deep?
I mean, you can watch it, like compare him to Justin Herbert, and like the ball just leaves their hands at different velocities. I think that Joe Burrow could still be a decent quarterback in the NFL, even as a rookie. He just has to get the ball out quicker, like you said, because the offensive tackles can't block anybody. The Colts defense, the way that they operate, zone defense, they attack a little bit, but they just basically want to keep everything in front of them. So I think that's okay for Tyler Boyd this week. He's like creeping towards like high-end wide receiver 2 value just because AJ Green's fallen off the cliff. And T. Higgins also somebody that you want to attack. He's 3rd in air yards per game in the last 4 weeks. He's really starting to pop in these models that I'm looking at. So I think that those would be the 2 guys, plus Joe Mixon, of course, who's one of the biggest storylines over the last 2 weeks is his splits after week 3 when he wasn't being targeted on 3rd downs. He was just not a part of the passing game. The last 2 weeks, Giovanni Bernard's snaps have gone down, and Joe Mixon has been operating as a check down artist. So I think that's the difference between Joe Mixon, like the RB10 overall, versus like maybe Joe Mixon, the RB like 6, RB7 overall.
The Bengals trailed that game 17-0 at the half and didn't score their first points until less than a minute remaining, a field goal. And Mixon still got 100% of the team's running back carries and out-targeted Gio Bernard 8-2, that 8 being a career high. So yeah, he's become a matchup-proof RB1 now. That's what we wanted, was the passing game usage.
By the way, Hayden just put the phrase "poppin' models" into my head over poppin' bottles. And
it's not
all right.
Not as fun.
Joe Burrow, by the way, he said he needs to get the ball out quicker. He's already getting it out like as quickly as anyone in the NFL. It's like top 5 or 6. So it's going to be, this offensive line is just going to be a problem for him all year.
I can pop bottles and pop models.
All right, let's move on. This is a kid
brand.
show. Unfortunately, though, we move on over to the Detroit Lions and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Detroit 1-3, Jacksonville 1-4, but the Lions are favored by 3.5 on the road. I say all that negativity with a pessimistic tone, but this total is massive at 54.5. I question that because these are 2 currently pointless franchises operating in the NFL with like no identity, no understanding of who they are now and who they want to be. So Daigle, which team do you have more belief in?
A lot to unpack here. I think I have faith in the Lions coming off a bye week. Matthew Stafford averaged 9 air yards per attempt in their first 2 games. Kenny Golladay came back, played limited snaps in week 3, and then right before the team went back to bye in week 5, Matthew Stafford actually averaged a season-high 11 air yards per attempt. So I do wonder if this is finally the game against this atrocious Jags defense that is not only dead last in passing defense DVOA, but also could still be missing Miles Jack, Josh Allen, and CJ Henderson, and DJ
Hayden.
TJ Hayden.
DJ Hayden, yeah, correct. So yeah, I think it's actually a tremendous spot. The issue is, of course, if the Jags hold their weight. And we don't know because we are still waiting on DJ Shark to practice since he has not yet on Thursday.
I mean, this needs to be the week for the Lions. So I said they're coming off their bye. Kenny Golladay should be 100% healthy now after getting in 2 games for the bye and then getting the bye to rest up. And like you said, just injuries at every level of the Jaguars defense, which was already not good and cannot afford injuries. Like this would be so dispiriting. Like John just alluded to, though, this turned into like an established Adrian Peterson game. We need to see, we crave 2019 Matthew Stafford. We need this. And his average intended air yards is still over 9, but it was 10.7 last year. It's 1.5 yards lower this year. We need the return of that. You feel like the Lions would understand they need the return of that offense. They're 1-3 and have been bad. But if we don't see it this week, it's probably not coming.
I'm looking at there's a lot of guys on the Lions that are fringe fantasy starters. I mean, TJ Hawkinson's like on that tight end 1-2 borderline. We're still waiting for DeAndre Swift. Could we please get him some more touches over Adrian Peterson? And Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola have just not been part of fantasy scoring at all. So if it doesn't happen here, I wonder if we're just going to get a Kenny Golladay offense and that's it for fantasy purposes. We need to see more from the Lions offense just because there's so much talent here. They just haven't been living up to the expectations.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Galladay has targeted Marvin Jones 15-5 since returning the past 2 weeks for the Lions. But Jones, much like what led us back to playing Brandon Cooks last week, has still run a route on 95% of Stafford's dropbacks in that time. So he's still out there, and it's a tremendous matchup. So I would still have confidence going back to Marvin Jones.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that no team would have a better opportunity to have their bye week come up so early in the season than the Detroit Lions, right? When they can hopefully sit back and say, what made us good in this first 7-8 games of 2019? Hey, guess what? Let's go do more of that. And there is no better opponent to do that against by the injuries you outlined, by the poor play that you've outlined of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if we do not get it, that this week from the Detroit Lions, then it needs to an Atlanta Falcon like type firing needs to happen because something needs to change. You can't just continue to make the same mistakes like you have in those first 4 games of the season. But I have no confidence that it is. The only thing that I reiterate that has given me confidence is a total of 54.5, and just that both these defenses suck.
The Lions are actually creating the lowest rate of pressure in the entire league. So again, it's another good spot for Minshew if we get DJ Chark. And the 4 games he's had Chark, 21 fantasy points per game, and then 9.2 in that miserable performance against Miami in an island game on Thursday night. So we have to wait for that. And James Robinson still in the same spot, 17 touches and 70% of the Jaguars running back touches in every game this year. I know it's scary to go back to him after you watch him throw a pass on 4th and 1 that goes behind him, but he's getting all the usage.
I wanted to open the show by saying that we have some major matchups this week between true title contenders, but we also have some major matchups between some strong bottom feeders. And we continue on with that theme, going to the Atlanta Falcons facing the Minnesota Vikings. Again, a massive total of 54. The Vikings are 1-4 and 4-point favorites here at home. Meanwhile, we know the Falcons now do not have a head coach in Dan Quinn, do not have a general manager in Thomas Dimitroff. They are also 0-5. Julio Jones, when I was blurbing on Wednesday, missed practice. We also found out that they have a staffer who contracted COVID. But on the Vikings end, it might be the bigger story, Hayden Winks, with Dalvin Cook out. Alexander Madison stepped in, saw 20 carries last week, where Dalvin already had 17. Should we expect them to just do the exact same thing with an over-under of, 33.5 carries in this game against the Falcons?
Yeah, Alexander Madison, this is why we were kind of targeting him in like the 10th, 11th round in season-long leagues, just because he would become an RB1 immediately if Dalvin Cook misses. And that is certainly the case against the Falcons, who are the 23rd defense against fantasy running backs this year. The Vikings have the second most implied points this week at 29. So this is a week to get Adam Thielen in there as every week wide receiver 1. He's first in air yard share in the NFL at 46%. Justin Jefferson, we've seen the talent, 14.8 yards per target. His usage is up and down still just because this is a Vikings team that wants to establish the run more than any other team in the NFL. But this is a bet on talent, bet on a matchup. This is why you get Justin Jefferson in there. And the other note, and I'll flip this over to Daigle, Irv Smith, he was at absolute nothing. If you're streaming for a tight end too, Daigle, is Irv Smith somebody that's on our radar all of a sudden?
I think so. At least we're monitoring, even though Josh cut me off when I was trying to talk about him in the waiver wire because he was having no part of it. Irv Smith this past week did run a season high 72.7% of his routes on Kirk Cousins dropbacks and saw a season high target share because the Vikings used a league high rate of 12 personnel, both league high in week 5 and league high for them all year. So the question is, was that a Jamal Adams-less game plan, or does that continue because those targets obviously siphoned away from Justin Jefferson? So I'm still going back to Justin Jefferson in a tremendous spot, but we have to look for that moving forward because that does put Smith on the map in a terrible, awful, no good tight end year.
That's why I asked, because I was doing my tight end rankings and I had to move like Irv Smith. I was like tight end 18 just based on the last week's usage. And there's some good tight ends on buys as well. So people are desperate for tight ends. I think that Irv Smith would be the guy that I would be circling as like the desperate tight end to play.
Can I tell you why I have an Irv Smith problem? And it's just personal. I mean, it's not, I don't know him, but
He texted you.
It was before the season, okay, when I was hyping up Henry Ruggs. We get these crazy comments on Twitter, and this is a major first world problem, but I'm carrying it with me until this day here in week 6. And I had a response that said, who should I drop on my roster for Henry Ruggs? And it was all names that you should not drop. And then I was like, there has to be someone else on here. This doesn't make sense. He's a Vikings fan. He said, I'm not dropping Irv Smith because I know he's going to be the number 2 pass catcher in this offense. I've read the training camp reports. I know he's going to be fantastic. He's going to be a pivotal part here. And I just said, no, you're wrong. And then could not check my Twitter the rest of I had to mute the guy because I've just got a stream of, no, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. So again, we all have our biases. We all carry things with us. And that's just why I cannot believe in Irv Smith, because I didn't then and I can't now.
Because of one fan who tweeted at you.
Have I been wrong? Have I been wrong? Just saying.
Irvin Smith, low end tight end 2 this week still, because I think it'll probably disappear just as quickly as it came.
That's fair.
Madison, but to get 20 carries in a game where the starter didn't go down till early in the third quarter is just totally insane. I mean, Madison's a top 3 running back this week.
Top 3.
Mike Boone is even kind of flex viable because 30 carries probably isn't going to happen for Madison. I think Mike Boone will be kind of involved. They even tried to get him a little bit involved as a change of pace last week. But yeah, I have Madison as my RB3 this week. It's just like the most sensible plug and play ever against a terrible defense. He's going to catch probably at least 5 to 6 passes against the defense that gives that up every week. And it's just a glorious plug and play spot.
Before we move on, Dago, you're not off the hook here, by the way. I know Seattle doesn't play, but we also have to refer to last week's game where we took the over-under, and once again, it went over. And I don't want to hear anything about that. It was a rain storm up in Seattle. What did you expect? They were playing in Seattle. So I think I moved to 7-0 on the season against you.
It's not 7-0. You're exaggerating that. But to be clear, what I expected was for Seattle to run more than 3 first-half offensive plays. That's what I expected.
I did not.
And also remember, I didn't have too much confidence. I just liked it for the fans. We got to give the fans some action here at the sake of my wallet.
Yeah. Are the fans going to pay for that lunch? Probably not.
I still will. I'm good for it.
All right, let's move on to the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. Feels like we have not seen these teams in 3 weeks. The Denver Broncos are 1-3. They're 10-point road dogs here against the Patriots, who are 2-2. We know this game was supposed to be played last week. It was delayed. But because of that delay, we likely get Cam Newton versus Drew Lock. Pat, looking at this Patriots team again, and we haven't even seen Cam Newton since seeing, obviously, the Patriots, but at their identity, it's so different than what they wanted to be last year with Tom Brady in many ways when, they were high in neutral game pass rate, throwing a lot of passing attempts. They want to run the football. They want to win situational football. They want to play great defense. So my question is, 10 points is a lot for a team that really kind of wants to not run a lot of plays and not be an explosive offense.
This is the problem is, what do the Broncos do well on offense? And Broncos, nothing but moving parts all year. Noah Fant hurt, KJ Hamler hurt, Cortland Sutton on IR, Drew Lock maybe rushing back after the 2-week absence. And Melvin Gordon only had a good game last time out because he got a 43-yard touchdown when the Jets couldn't stop him in garbage time. They were trying to run out the clock and they let him bounce outside for a 43-yard touchdown. Since then, Melvin Gordon has been arrested for drunk driving. And it's just this is just kind of a hopeless spot for the Denver Broncos. And the Patriots, it's weird on offense because I feel like we don't truly, we think we know what the Patriots offense wants to be. But we've only had 2 or 3 games of the real Patriots offense. We had wildly different approaches in weeks 1 and 2. Sony Michel on injured reserve now. We finally, it feels like it's been a million years since we've seen Damian Harris play, but he's one of week 4's breakout stars with the 17 carries, 100 yards. And I feel like he's getting completely not discussed this week. The line does feel heavy, but it's just about they're playing an opponent that does almost literally nothing well on offense.
Yeah, and what I was trying to say is how, and I think it's being forced on them, Pat, how the Patriots are going to run their offense because they just don't have any explosive players. It's a recipe for tight games. And, you don't see a team that wants to design tight games typically having a 10-point spread. But I'll raise you on your Damian Harris point, Daigle, because I think Damian Harris, the last time we saw him, was the Patriots' best running back. And if we follow the formula, you should have interest in playing a team's best running back when they're 10-point home favorites.
Of course, I still think he's the RB3 or 4, despite being skeptical of his ceiling with Cam Newton back. Cam Newton is still only 6 carries behind Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, despite playing 2 fewer games. So remember, he adds 12 carries under center to this team. And that, of course, takes away from Damian Harris, who I could be wrong, but I don't think they're taking Rex Burkhead and James White off the field for these passing downs for. So something I'm monitoring. And I would start him. We have 4 teams on bye weeks. We need to fill some slots. So I'm even starting him in a few leagues. I am just still concerned about his ceiling.
Yeah, are we that confident that Damian Harris would be the goal line back over Rex Burkhead? I'm not fully convinced that that's the case either. And if he gets 15 carries, but they all come at the 50-yard line, what does that really actually get you? So it's kind of a 3-way committee. I don't know, Rotopat, how are you ranking these 3? I think I would have James White first, then Damian Harris, then Rex Burkhead, but I'm not really sure.
I have Damian Harris very high. If it was the RB24, James White is the RB27, and even if it's about empty calorie carries, even if that's you think that's the case with him, it's running back is just bleak this week.
It is
very, very. You have who we putting? Jamal Williams, Jerick McKinnon, J.D. McKissick, Mark Ingram, DeAndre Swift, Phillip Lindsay, Nyheim Hines. These are the players in the RB30s.
So bad.
And it's Matt Breida, Leonard Fournette. It's who do you really want to bet on? And I will just bet on Damian Harris again because such a good game environment outlook for the Patriots. It's one game that was 2 weeks ago, but yeah, it was 17 carries and he immediately looked like the best pure runner in the offense. And John said to me, Cam really it takes a lot of the air out of the balloon. But I just don't even know who else I can reasonably forecast for 15 carries. And I feel like Damian Harris is a good bet for 15 carries.
The goal line back is Cam Newton still, especially with how he's playing right now and how they want to use him. And you mentioned and you asked what does 15 carries the 50-yard line get you, Hayden? It gets you 2019 Devin Singletary is what it gets you. All right.
Exactly. RB3.
And that's why Phillip Lindsay would enter the conversation as an usage-based RB3 because that range is so bad. And that's assuming Melvin Gordon is out this game. We don't know just yet.
By the way, Pat, where are we on the Drew Lock Believometer?
This actually is a manufactured narrative, by the way. I never came out in belief of Drew Lock. It actually is.
Black history. It
actually is. I said he was the first Mizzou quarterback I ever wanted to root for, and I marveled at the fact that the Broncos actually set him up for success. But I still said it was a very high-risk strategy because I know Drew Lock's game very, very, very well. And yeah, unfortunately, it is not the upside play has not hit for the Denver Broncos.
It will be interesting to see this offense, though, because last time we saw the Broncos, Tim Patrick had a 25% target share. That, of course, was with Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, and KJ Hamler all leaving the game. So we don't even know what this offense is with Drew Lock just yet.
Yeah, and Stephon Gilmore coming back along with Cam Newton, almost certainly if Jerry Jeudy's out there. Yeah, that will be an isolation matchup. And so Noah Fant will just have to have the breakout game of all breakout games, I think, if the Broncos are going to make this one tight. All right. Let's go now to the Washington football team, the New York Giants, a 42.5 total. So fitting with these two football teams. But the Giants, despite being 0-5, are favorites here at home by 2.5. Kyle Allen, not on the injury report, but Hayden, what we saw last week with Washington facing the Rams, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and tell me if I am wrong. You can be perfectly honest with me. I said the drop-off from Kyle Allen or Dwayne Haskins to Kyle Allen would not hurt Antonio Gibson, would not hurt Terry McLaurin. And then last week, neither person did absolutely anything because it's just the disruption and the pressure that the Rams were able to create. Are we afraid that is going to happen again here against the Giants?
Terry McLaurin's quarterback, I don't care which one it is, it's going to be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL every single week. And that's just kind of how you have to roll with it. The good news is Terry McLaurin has wide receiver 1 fantasy usage, a 44% air yard share. So even if the offense can figure it out a little bit, we're going to be able to fire up Terry McLaurin as a wide receiver 2. He's had some tough matchups individually over the start of the season. He faces James Bradbury here. That's also another tough matchup. Watching for is Antonio Gibson. He's been very hit and miss. You see the explosion. You see some bad plays. They're still just going to keep increasing his usage over the course of the season. So I think that he's a person maybe this week just because bye weeks and injuries, you start him as an RB2. But I think eventually he'll end up getting there more consistently than he has in the beginning of the year just because he's a player to bet on, just on talent alone.
The good news for Terry McLaurin is, Frank, not to be disrespectful, there's just no way Kyle Allen could be as bad as Alex Smith was last week. It's a feel-good story, but Alex Smith, provided quite literally zero threat. It was almost kind of sad. Like, this did not look like he should be on an NFL football field to me. And it was about as dispiriting as quarterback play could be. And Kyle Allen, hopefully Washington's gotten that out of their system. And Kyle Allen, they're now going to give him a few games. I think you highlight Terry McLaurin, had some tough individual matchups. This one is not great. But I think the outlook improves a little bit. Hopefully J.D. McKissic's not catching 6 passes again. J.D. McKissic has 13 receptions over the past 2 weeks, but it's kind of hidden the fact that Antonio Gibson has 9 receptions over the past 2 weeks, which is actually, he had his 2 season highs for receptions. So Kyle Allen, is he's not as bad as Joe Flacco, so he's not the bottom ranked QB this week, Hayden. But Kyle Allen, if he can get 2 or 3 starts, get in rhythm, whatever that is for Kyle Allen, I still think it'll be a net positive for Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson versus Dwayne Haskins.
The comeback player of the year averaged 2.1 yards per attempt for Washington last week. Quickly though, Pat, I am curious where you have Terry McLaurin and Darius Slayton ranked, because that's practically the only 2 players people will have lineup decisions with in this game.
I've got Terry still on the wide receiver 1-2 borderline, which may be too rich for some people's blood, but last week, it's kind of like you put the game in the trash. Before that, Terry McLaurin almost every week was getting 5 or 6 catches, 85 yards. We know all about the ceiling. Darius Slayton, my boy. So I contest your Drew Lock narrative. I have a Darius Slayton narrative. One of my boys.
You do have a Darius Slayton narrative.
But I'm low end wide receiver 3. Daniel Jones again. Daniel Jones touchdown watch. We need a website. Has Daniel Jones thrown a touchdown since week 1 yet.com. He has not.
And that's why I like Washington defense. I wrote him up as the top streamer in the waiver wire column this week. Not only hasn't thrown a touchdown since week 1, but has tossed 5 interceptions and lost 3 fumbles while taking 16 sacks this year. Just atrocious.
The Giants, just 4 of their 40 red zone plays have equal touchdowns this year. That's the lowest percentage in the NFL. This one doesn't top my list of acknowledging, hey, we could have an upset here, but I would say it's probably 3rd in the confidence rankings. I'm really in on Washington this week.
So what even qualifies as an upset in this game?
Yeah, I don't know.
2.5. Look.
By the way, John, you got to remind me. I gave you the Jets game last week. Remind me not to give you this game this week.
All right. Well, can I finish? I'm going to finish. And the reason is because we just talked about this Giants defense, if they can match what the Rams did last week defensively. And it's absolutely not the case. They're 30th and 31st in pass D and run D DVOA. Meanwhile, I think that the Giants offensive line, you just talked about what Daniel Jones does against pressure. Well, part of that is Andrew Thomas, who I really like coming out of Georgia, is just allowing every single person to win on an inside move against him. And we got Chase Young back in Washington last week. We know that they have other pass rushers along that defensive line. I think this is a recipe for success this week to bring Washington to 2-4 and to cover that 2.5, if not win outright. That's what we're Fair?
So I didn't realize you were still going.
I understand. Let's move on to actually a good game, hopefully. The Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles, a total of 47.5. The 4-1 Ravens are 7.5 point road favorites here. Hayden, I read the stat from Rich Rebar and I had to reread it 2 times, then 3 times. Lamar Jackson has been outside of the top 15 scorers in 3 of his past 4 starts. That has to change this week, right? And why hasn't it changed in the last 3 of the 4 weeks?
He's not running as much. His yardage is cut in half. His attempts are cut by 25%. That's been the big thing. And we've seen the Ravens pass the ball more. But the problem with the Ravens passing attack is they're first in air yards per attempt, which is good usually, but it leaves them to be very volatile because you're relying on downfield shots. And if those aren't connecting, that's when you see Lamar Jackson finish outside the top 15. I think that there's still plenty of upside. I am not fully expecting 2019 rushing totals out of Lamar Jackson, but I do think that Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews are going to start connecting on some of these targets more so than they did in the first couple games. But you always have to remember, this is a very volatile passing attack just because they're throwing downfield at higher rates than anybody in the league.
I think it is going to change this week. And, the 2 offenses are different, but I think they put pressure in the same area, and that's going to be the Eagles linebackers. And I'm referring to the San Francisco game earlier in the season when George Kittle got 15 receptions in that game. Jerick McKinnon McKinnon got 7 receptions in that game, and that was with Nick freaking Mullins throwing the football. I mean, these Eagles linebackers are going to be put in a blender by Greg Roman this week, and not just in the passing game. They also have to worry about the running threat on the ground in those play action fakes. So I think this is the week that we get it back. Maybe again, 2 touchdowns to your boy, Mark Andrews, and then over the top, even more downfield playmaking than the 49ers have with Marquise Brown, so on and so forth. So I'll go on a ledge, not much of a ledge, but we get a top 7 scoring week from Lamar Jackson this week. Pat, what do you think?
No, you go, John. I'll go after you.
Oh, I was going to say Lamar actually has a higher percentage of the team's carries through 5 weeks this year than last year. The issue is, although he's coming off a season high in pass attempts, he's coming off a career low in rushing attempts. To just so you know where I'm at with it, I just recently traded in my 12-team home league Lamar and CEH for Stafford and Michael Thomas. Just because, remember, the Ravens' gauntlet of scheduling is about to come up. Like, this was supposed to be the easy portion of their schedule, and now it just gets harder from here.
I mean, they can be 5-1. So, like, from a win-loss perspective.
Yeah, but I'm talking for fantasy. Like, of course, we've been affected. You just mentioned the stat from Rich.
Totally.
Yeah, we're seeing an offense just where nothing is in gear. He's the QB 17 overall on the season. He's averaging 169 yards passing since week 1, averaging 6.13 attempts since week 1, since the demolition of who did they destroy in week 1? Since a huge week 1, he's not been making big plays as a passer. And just an offense that chaos isn't the right word, but nothing is settled. They haven't had a running back exceed 11 carries all year. There is no number 2 receiver that has emerged. Mark Andrews hasn't had a ceiling game yet. Lamar is running much less, like you highlighted, and it's not this kind of game flow and bad luckness. I mean, he's missed so many open throws to Marquise Brown. As someone who has Marquise Brown in my high stakes home league, like, I'm on tilt every week about Lamar Jackson missing should be like a 30 or 40 yard touchdown to Marquise Brown, and he just needs to play better.
Can I take a walk down Narrative Street, and maybe you guys can join me down here, this little stroll that will go on 36 minutes into the podcast. And I know Lamar played at an MVP level basically for the entire season last year, but this Ravens team didn't really hit their stride until about 4 or 5 to 6 games into the season, right? So maybe it's just going to start hitting that point. And, I have no indication that is going to happen. But the Ravens at this point compared to last year are better off from a win-loss perspective. And I think once a player shows that MVP type talent like Lamar showed last year, he can get back to it. And I agree with you, Pat. It's like we talked about in the recap show. It's like inches or feet or even yards a few times. It's just not quite clicking on the special moments like we saw last year. But I feel like against, again, these Philly linebackers, it's the perfect time. It's the perfect time to do that. You mentioned, by the way, Hayden, big plays in the Ravens offense. I feel like this Philly team is built on big plays of their own, yet they have no one to create big plays. Like, it's a conflict of identity. It's Carson Wentz, like, not wanting to play anything in the quick game, wanting to hold on to the football, create time for himself, and then throw down the field to absolutely no one who can win down the field, which is frightening against this Baltimore Ravens secondary.
Yeah, he keeps trying to force things that aren't there, and that's just part of his DNA. That's why he was so good in 2017, but that's why he can have these really low moments, and that's just because the receivers aren't healthy. They're not very good. Zach Ertz is literally looking worse than Jason Witten right now, and this is kind of trending in that direction for a couple of years now, but it's finally caught up to Zach Ertz. He's like a tight end 2, high-end tight end 2 now, even though he's getting like tight end 1 usage just because he can't separate. Miles Sanders is still going to be a stud as an RB1. The question is, do you go to Travis Fulgham? Does that thing exist? He's 6'3", 215, looked pretty good last week, ran around on 77% of the dropbacks, but now he's facing a Baltimore pass defense that has 2 really stud corners, and we really can't fully trust Carson Wentz. So, Rotopat, Fulgham, RB3 or wide receiver 3, yes or no?
Nah, he's a wide receiver 4. I mean, you got to take notice anytime someone catches 10 passes that, we don't like to point and chase, but I mean, you have to notice these things. And if a guy catches 10 passes, he's at least on the radar. But I mean, this is the kind of, has he scored 2 weeks in a row? I think he scored 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, he's at least in the mix, and these targets have to go somewhere. And speaking of springing the Ravens offense, Darius Slay could be out for the Eagles. And my final thought is, we need to give Miles Sanders a medal for scoring a 74-yard touchdown in the first quarter and then somehow not getting 100 yards from scrimmage. Not at all sore about it at all. I don't play in weird leagues with bonus rules, but how do you do that? That's what I want to know.
Reminder that Dallas Goedert returns next week, is eligible to return. And through the first 2 games, Eagles ran a season high rate of 12 personnel. League high, I'd say 74%. And in these past 3 games, they've been at 29% because they haven't had 2 special tight ends. So that's why I'm concerned, because they'll be getting Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson back, perhaps Jalen Reagor in the next 3 games. And we think Travis Fulgham will survive that. I'm going to say no. So although Fulgham could be in play this week, I don't think he's in play like 2 or 3 weeks from now at all.
All right. Cleveland Browns, Pittsburgh Steelers is next, a 51 total. We know Cleveland, after their win last week against the Colts, are 4-1 after that disastered week 1. They've won 4 in a row. Yet the Steelers, off their surprising bye week, are 4-0. Not to sour on the Browns. I mean, they are 4-1. That should be celebrated. I am not throwing a party for Baker Mayfield just yet. And this is all eye test. This is all aesthetic stuff. The plays that he is making are not ones that I can project him to make each and every week. I mean, they are double or triple pumps. They are uncertain. They are erratic. They are him moving around. I know that that's like kind of the quarterback that he is. I'm not so sure if that's what Kevin Stefanski wants him to be. And what Kevin Stefanski wants is this run offense to also win against potentially the best run defense in the NFL, or at least top 3 in the NFL. So Daigle, that's my question. And it's a big question. What wins? One of the best run offenses in the NFL, or one of the best run defenses in the NFL in the Pittsburgh Steelers?
You asked me last week during the review pod to review Baker Mayfield's performance, and I stumbled and I was confused because I don't know. He's making everything look so hard right now. Like, he struggles for simple reads, and it doesn't have to be this complicated. He's 17 of 40 under pressure this year for 3.9 yards per attempt. And as we know, the Steelers still blitz at the league's highest rate. So I am concerned. The thing is, the Steelers are actually allowing a ton of explosive plays. They've become somewhat of a boom or bust offense. And I still don't worry about Kareem Hunt, honestly, in any matchup. So I don't know if the question is, can they stop Baker Mayfield? Because of course they can. Can they stop Kareem Hunt is the question here. And I'm still very high, top 8 running back, in my opinion, this week on Kareem Hunt, because Dearness Johnson practically would not have been involved at all if it weren't for Hunt's 4th quarter cramping last week. So I'm still playing him. But everywhere else, Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, like, I have to go to Pat for that because I really don't know in this spot.
I was to say Baker Mayfield, it's almost like the usage and the production. He's almost like a poor man's Jared Goff, which is very bad because Jared Goff is the poor man's Jared Goff. So it's very hard to see the overall. I mean, although Beckham, at least the usage has been consistent. I mean, this is a player who is so talented. He should be a 9 to 12 target player, but he's a 6 to 8 target player. And, I mean, I guess the quote-unquote good news is he hasn't been below that. They're getting him his weekly looks. We know they're doing some creative things with him. That's just he's a volatile wide receiver too. That's not going to change. And Jarvis Landry, I mean, is Jarvis Landry showing enough to be an every week wide receiver 3 at this point? That's kind of like his ancestral homeland. Like, he's always there. He's never not there. But just, I mean, he's getting, I guess, what's the word? Consistent. What's the word? Consistent. I couldn't think of the word consistent.
It's week 6. It's okay.
He's getting like 4 to 6 looks every week, but there's no weeks where that's spiked. Like, if they're in comeback mode, it's like the Browns will still just be running the ball. They're not going to be like funneling the targets to Jarvis Landry. So Landry has gone to like almost a 0 upside wide receiver.
He's been the wide receiver 23 and 24 the past 2 games, but that's like literally ceiling in this offense.
Yeah, and Hayden, it kind of feels like Jarvis Landry's giving off some Julian Edelman vibes in terms of every time he catches a pass, you don't know if he's going to get up for the rest of the game.
Coughs up dust.
I will say, and Daigle was right on, that this Steelers defense isn't quite what it was last year. And Hayden, I just assume like you've read every single analytics piece out there every single week. So I want to turn to you for this, because apparently that they're one of the best in the league on 1st and 2nd down, yet like 31st in the NFL on 3rd downs, which makes no sense. And it seems like if you're bad in just that one area, it's going to regress to what you are in those first 2 other situations. And so I'm still a major believer in the Steelers defense like I am the Steelers offense.
Yeah, anytime you start cutting a small season, we're dealing with football, and then you start cutting it into what happens on each down, that's when you can get some really noisy things. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. I still think the Steelers defense is the best unit in the league, with the Bucs losing Vita Vea. The first adjusted sack rate, they can get after the quarterback. The one weird thing that caught my eye is the Browns 29th in pass attempts, second in rush attempts. The Steelers have allowed the fewest rush attempts per game in the NFL. They're only giving up 17 carries, and that's a game script stat. That's also a kind of a slow-paced game type of stat. So that's my big concern with Kareem Hunt is he going to get enough carries to pay off as like a top 6 running back? Of course, he's still an RB1, but like if I'm looking at like DraftKings and if I'm going to pay like a top 3, top 4 price tag, I would be a little hesitant that the carries aren't going to be there for Kareem Hunt.
We haven't said anything about this Pittsburgh Steelers offense after what Chase Claypool did last week. Quickly, I want to say that Myles Garrett is playing at an unreal level. And whenever he is isolated in situations, he's getting pressures. Pittsburgh's offensive line has maintained one of the best units across the years. And so maybe they'll be able to slow down Myles Garrett. But Pat, where do you have Chase Claypool ranked this week? And since we are recording around midday on Thursday, do we know the status right now of Deontay Johnson?
We're still waiting for it.
Yeah, he's yet to practice. I mean, Chase Claypool, again, I said earlier, you don't like to chase points, but Chase Claypool entered week 5 already averaging 25 yards per catch. And if someone scores 4 touchdowns in a game, or it could have been 5, I mean, I don't know if you can qualify that as point chasing. And especially with the way Juju Smith-Schuster is being used with like one of the lowest average depth ADOTs in the entire league, with Deontay Johnson, I mean, Chase Claypool has to be treated as a wide receiver too. I mean, the guy looked like Calvin Johnson last week, and it was a top 50 draft pick, so it's not like this is like totally out of nowhere. And he was kind of a divisive prospect, but I mean, someone that a lot of people thought had a lot of upside. And you chase, if someone scores 4 touchdowns, and especially it was on really monster usage, over 10 targets, got a carry or 2. I'm comfortable chasing Chase Claypool in a game where Deontay Johnson is not going to play.
I think the best analogy rest of season, once everyone's healthy here, would be Chase Claypool as Michael Gallup, with explosive targets, volatile weekly. And then Juju Smith-Schuster as Amari Cooper, just dependable, getting low ADOT targets. And of course, Deontay Johnson as CeeDee Lamb, exploding on his high target share.
I'm about to say some bad things I'm going to regret. Chase Claypool is the best Steelers receiver. He pops on talent. And I'll say that Deontay Johnson is the least talented of the 3. Now,
I disagree with that.
He hates Deontay Johnson. Campaign will not stop.
I know. It's really bugging me. The one thing that I'm going to have some regrets is Deontay Johnson. He's earned those targets, and targets is the best predictor of actual talent. So I am going against kind of the normal thought process here. But when I watch them, Chase Claypool just moves so much different, and we saw him being utilized on carries. I mean, they were manufacturing touches, and every single time I see Deontay Johnson on these manufactured touches, he's running backwards. He's getting pegged in the back of the head by Big Ben. He was earning those targets, and I know he still is a very good route runner, and he makes some plays after the catch as well. But he just seems so sloppy compared to a Chase Claypool. When you get him the ball, you're seeing like true wide receiver 1 talent, and that's what he profiled as a prospect. It was boom bust, but he offered wide receiver 1 upside, and I don't think Deontay Johnson ever did. Small, undersized prospect, like day 2 out of Toledo. He was a little older. I think that Deontay Johnson is a number 2 receiver in an offense. I think that Chase Claypool is an actual wide receiver 1.
I think that's fine, but remember, Deontay was also like an elite special teams player, which helps him out when he catches these shallow targets, because he's able to get yards after the catch because of his strength and his skill set. So I still think Deontay's a special player. Juju's the one who just kind of falls behind as a high floor guy.
Well, I think it's a good problem to have all 3.
Sure.
You know? And I know we're trying to figure out which one we're going to rank higher and which we're going to play above others, and maybe in DFS. But from a team perspective, what a great problem to have. We talked about this a lot on the Wednesday night episode with Denny and Pat. So if you guys want to check out that full spiel, go back and listen to that one. But just the gist is, this is basically offensively and defensively the Steelers' window to win, because if they're not going to pay Juju, having 3 talents like this at wide receiver, I know they're not all healthy right now, but again, this is what you build towards in your window to win. All right, let's move on. This one is the game that stood out to me when looking at the entire slate. The 1-4 Houston Texans with a 52.5 total are just 3.5-point road dogs here to the Tennessee Titans. Make sure, second guess me if I didn't get this one correct. But the Titans, as we just saw, winning on, what was it, Tuesday Night Football? Yeah, against the Buffalo Bills, improving to 4-0. So Hayden, what am I missing here? Why is this only 3.5? I mean, the Titans get back Jeffrey Simmons, A.J. Brown coming off a multi-week injury, look great. The Texans are 26th in run D, DVOA. It feels like every single thing that the Titans do well, the Texans do not. They will win by at least a touchdown on Sunday.
I agree. I think people are just still sleeping on Ryan Tannehill, who's second in passing EPA. And if you look back last year, he was top 5 as well. He is a really good player. And the way that they're utilizing him is really helpful when you have Jonnu Smith after the catch. You have A.J. Brown looking like one of the better talents in the NFL as well. Derrick Henry is the one that's kind of not been very efficient. He's like averaging like a career low 3.7 yards per carry. But in general, this offense is very good. The offensive line is very talented. And the Texans defense is also going to be missing Bernardrick McKinney as well. So they were already bad. They're going to get worse. So I don't know why this line's at -3.
And Derrick Henry has actually outtouched Jerry McNichols 107-13 on the year. 5 of those 13 touches coming last week in the fourth quarter when the Titans were already up by 3 scores. So it's still Derrick Henry's backfield. Darrington Evans going on IR recently. So we should expect perhaps even more involvement in the passing game going forward. It's an eruption spot against this bad Texans front seven.
I think the Titans were just trying to manage Derrick Henry. I mean, he got a season low, 19 carries. I think they were just trying to manage him after the weird COVID craziness on the short week. And Derrick Henry will go over 20. As Hayden said, I mean, Ryan Tannehill is just like back doing what shouldn't be possible. Where he said, I think both of his past 2 games, he's had 3 or more touchdowns on fewer than 30 attempts. And like wasn't sure if that approach was sustainable, but it has been largely sustained this season. And it's weird. I mean, the line about like division familiarity. I don't know about the post Bob bump for the Texans. I
mean, it makes no sense.
Explain the line. It's hard to explain the line.
Here's another thing and we saw Tim Kelly, and he's called plays most of the year. And who knows if he's escaped the shadow of Bill O'Brien. I mean, Bill O'Brien's no longer there, so I guess he does. But Seth Galina pointed this out on Twitter, and it's something that we asked for prior to the season was for things to be easier offensively for Deshaun Watson. Yet last week, they finally did, get Randall Cobb involved a little bit more, and Brandon Cooks finally showed up. But here it is. Here's the tweet. Deshaun Watson's play callers have only called a screen or play action attempt on 25% of his dropbacks this season, the lowest in the league. I mean, they are not helping Deshaun Watson. Nothing is easy. Meanwhile, it's just about as easy as possible for what Ryan Tannehill, while he's still making difficult throws, is doing on the other side of this. Yeah, I mean, go to Vegas, go to Jersey, go to Pennsylvania, put whatever you want on this game, because to me, it's just shocking that this line is anything lower than 6. And
we did talk about, though, Brandon Cooks' usage, and they made a concerted effort to get him involved. His usage did not change, so you can still go forward with him confidently. Everyone may still be scared to play Will Fuller, but in his 4 healthy starts, he's averaged 18 fantasy points per game, which would rank 10th overall among wide receivers this year. And then, of course, that one appearance on milk cartons around town in his lone trainer's table game. So Will Fuller is still wide receiver 1 as long as he's healthy.
I'm so glad that Jonnu Smith was one of the 10 players we suggested people that they must draft heading into the season, because while tight end sucks this year, Jonnu Smith is exploding. Maybe Vegas thinks like it's bad that the Titans actually get to practice this week. Maybe that's what it is.
And what's funny is that last week we talked about that being a bad line, right? But the Jaguars should have led if Stephen Hauschka made 2 field goals and he got cut midweek. So like the Texans didn't just like win that. They didn't dominate that game. They practically absolutely won, or accidentally won.
All right, 4:00 games now. Oh, we start with just a wonderful contest. Don't we love this sport? The 0-5 New York Jets with a 47 total and 9.5-point road dogs face off against the Miami Dolphins, who are now 2-3. I literally have nothing written down for this game. Typically, I make notes below these. But Daigle, I guess this is another game that will make Ryan Fitzpatrick look like a competent NFL quarterback.
Ryan Fitzpatrick's been a QB1 the past 4 weeks, but I actually think it's a great spot for Mr. Myles Gaskin himself
Don't
because
say it.
21 touches in 2 of the last 3 games. And this past week with Jordan Howard healthy scratched, Myles Gaskin got a season high 5 touches inside the 10-yard line, and the teams only carry inside the 5. So do you like bad players who are a 9.5-point home favorites over bad defenses? I do. So I will gladly take those touches any single week.
Hayden, we saw Preston Smith get involved. We saw Devontae Parker more involved. We saw Myles Gaskin. We see Mike Gesicki. Hey, it's finally going to pick them to see who you want to play this week against the worst team in the NFL, the Jets.
Myles Gaskin, RB7 overall in fantasy usage over the last 4 weeks.
Oh, baby.
His touch shares while leading 40%, while trailing 23%. So that's one of the biggest differences. When the Dolphins have a lead, Myles Gaskin's getting the rock on 40% of the plays. They're 10-point favorites. I think Myles Gaskin is a really strong RB2 this week. And we have to go back to the well with Devontae Parker. But the big story for me this week, Ryan Fitzpatrick in DFS. I think that he's very viable. The Jets, of course, 30th in passing EPA. I have picked up Ryan Fitzpatrick in a couple leagues, happily to start him this week. He's been the QB 10 overall this season. So I think that this is an actual spot to invest in a up and down offense. And I think that the Dolphins are actually for sure in play this week.
So the takeaway from Myles Gaskin was that he converted the goal line carry after they made Jordan Howard a healthy scratch. So like he passed the important test that he needed to, and he's still not a great player, but I mean he is now like a solidified top 18 option on him. Unless they sign Le'Veon Bell, which stranger things have happened. That probably will not happen. But that's my Myles Gaskin spiel.
And as we know, if Jamison Crowder plays, Jamison Crowder is he's a top 3 scorer at the wide receiver position, but we will rank him inside of the top 15, right, Pat?
I could only get to 17 personally. I try to get him higher.
I have him wide receiver 16 or 17. It's just there's always bottom falls out potential, obviously, with this offense and Joe Flacco, and it's hard to have any player on the Jets ranked in the top 20, like any position. He's a safe top 20 option. The bottom could fall out, but this usage is just absurd, and he's an easy top 18 receiver.
I believe the Dolphins are getting healthier at cornerback. At least they started to last week, so that's helping a lot against
Byron Jones.
Only Jamison Crowder they have to cover. That's it.
Yeah.
As I wrote in the waiver wire column, LaMichael P. Ryan, a deep league ad. You're not starting him this week.
And we should add that we are recording this before Le'Veon Bell signs anywhere. So if it is the Dolphins, that's not going to change anything this week, and it's okay. We don't have to talk about this week because he's not going to play anywhere until next week. All right. Next game, the only other 4:00 game in the window, a great one. The Green Bay Packers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 54.5 total in this one. Packers, we know, are 4-0. Feels like we have not seen them in quite a while, but they're 1-point favorites here against the Bucs. Hayden, it's a massive loss with Vita Vea out for the remainder of the season. He's been the best run stopper in the NFL. So doesn't this line up for an Aaron Jones game? And we've already seen the Packers win via an Aaron Jones game.
Definitely. Aaron Jones is getting all the usage that you want. And that's not even with 100% snaps. You just have to completely ignore the snap counts that Aaron Jones is getting, because Jamal Williams will be on the field occasionally. But when Aaron Jones is on the field, he's getting the ball. When he's running a route, he's getting targeted. I moved Devontae Adams right back up to wide receiver 1 overall in my rankings this week. He's had plenty of time to come off of his soft tissue injury. I think that he could have played if they wanted to push it, but they were wisely being cautious with Devontae Adams playing it for the long run. I think that Devontae Adams, even though it's a kind of a tough matchup, the Bucs defense is really good. Devontae Adams is my number 1 receiver this week and moving forward.
Remember, he tweeted furiously before that Monday night game against the Saints before their bye, and then deleted it because he was ready to go, but the team wanted to give him that 14-day break. So now he's practically been healthy for 21 days, and it's been so long since we've seen him dominated. So we forget that from week 9 when he returned from injury last year and week 1 when he was fully healthy this year, he'd only dipped below double-digit targets in one of those 11 contests and had never seen a target share lower than 22% in that span. Remember, this guy is the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, and do not forget that this week.
You could have to do a little hand-to-hand combat with Carlton Davis, but I mean, it's there's a lot of really, really great setups at wide receiver this week. Calvin Ridley without Julio Jones in a great matchup. I mean, Tyreek Hill is in a great spot. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is in an amazing spot. So there's competition at the top, but Devontae Adams' usage is going to be just through the absolute roof at the end of the season. I mean, he should be the number 1 overall point scorer receiver from here on out. And Aaron Jones, amongst running backs who are actually active this week, so not counting injured or running backs on bye, he's the number 2 running back by average points. And without Vita V, Aaron Jones, 2 more touchdowns than any other player in the NFL since the beginning of last season. It's going to be an eruption spot.
Mute.
Speaking of wide receivers, the Bucs have been injured earlier this season. We've seen Chris Godwin miss games. He returned to practice on a limited basis on Wednesday, which is a big improvement for him. Scotty Miller, I believe, was the exact same way. Mike Evans missed practice, yet we saw him miss practice heading into last week, and he played. And Mike Evans, I mean, this is one of the wild stats through 5 weeks in NFL seasons. On 22 receptions, Mike Evans has 6 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ludicrous. Jair Alexander has been fantastic this season, yet the Packers defense as a whole, I think, has taken a little bit of a step back versus what they did last year. What's your view, Daigle, on this Bucs offense in this matchup?
Mike Evans will be leading a surprise column I am writing, since we have no Thursday night football that you can read on Friday morning when you're listening. Buy highs or buy lows and sell highs, because Mike Evans has a 22% target share in 3 games without Chris Godwin this year, and 11% in the 2 games he's played with Chris Godwin. So you're only banking on touchdown efficiency. Can Evans do that with Tom Brady in this offense? Sure, he's a great player, but you don't want to bank on that consistently. We can't do that. So I would easily sell Mike Evans high before Chris Godwin perhaps returns this week.
I think Chris Godwin come back and almost help Mike Evans, because the Bucs desperately need Chris Godwin back. They cannot be funneling 6 to 7 targets like the Tyler Johnsons of the world anymore. They've just been totally out of sync. There's just lots of wasted targets to pedestrian talents like Tyler Johnson and Cameron Brate last week. And I almost think Chris Godwin coming back will make life easier for Tom Brady and maybe free up, not have so much defensive attention rolled Mike Evans' way, because it was a really tough matchup in the Bears, but there was no one other than Mike Evans who presented like any passing game threat for the Bucs last week. Scotty Miller
Johnson is good, man. Tyler Johnson's a good little player.
He's a rookie. I mean, though, he's a rookie who shouldn't be out there getting 6 targets right now. And they need Chris Godwin back, because Tom Brady kind of looked like he looked old. He really, really needs Chris Godwin back.
Well, he forgot he definitely looked old. he literally had a memory lapse. We've seen good Rojo, haven't we, Hayden? Should we talk about good Rojo when it
He's
happens?
led the NFL in rushing.
2 years.
He's led the NFL in rushing over the past 2 weeks when Leonard.
To me, he's just really one-dimensional. He offers nothing in the passing game, continues to drop passes, doesn't really move well after the catch. He can run between the tackles. He's a very powerful runner, and he has enough vision to make things work. We'll see how usage comes back when LaShawn McCoy practicing, Leonard Fournette possibly due back as well. There's a lot of moving parts in this backfield, so Ronald Jones, you're talking about Jameson Crowder, the bottom can fall out at any second. Ronald Jones, the bottom can fall out at any second, just because we don't know what the usage is. And he always seems like he's one fumble away. So I think the Packers run defense of 26 in rushing EPA. They're 30th against the position in fantasy. So I think that Ronald Jones deserves some RB2 love, but the floor is just much lower than some of the other RB2s. Maybe the ceiling's a little higher though.
46 of the team's 55 backfield touches the past 2 weeks. But when Leonard Fournette returns, like Hayden was saying, what do you do then?
Yeah, I want to reiterate, because we don't talk a lot about defense here. Packers pass D and rush D DVOA are 25th in the NFL. And this is something that we haven't seen for years with the Bucs defense. And Todd Bowles has been fantastic. And Pat mentioned the cornerbacks, and Vita Vea being out might change this. But they're number 4 in pass D DVOA, number 3 in run defense DVOA. I mean, that's a long departure from what we saw with the years of Vernon Hargreaves, and I could keep going down the list. But they have talent at every single level of the defense right now, and a great play caller and defense coordinator in Todd Bowles as well.
Not to put you on the spot, but I do wonder if that's just the scheme and openly allowing, as they've said in the past, Mike Pettin, teams to run on them, because they'd rather that happen than teams throwing on them, because they were number 27 in rush defense DVOA last year. So I do wonder if that's purposely.
But I would say the major difference is they aren't generating as much pressure as they did last year. And we remember Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith were fantastic, and Kenny Clark up the middle. I believe Kenny Clark has missed some time this year, And we know that unless you are one of the Bosas, unless you're Myles Garrett, I keep going down the list, it can be difficult year in and year out to create individual sack totals. And I'm not sure if Preston Smith and Sirius, with who I love, are going to be able to do that year over year like they did in 2019.
And again, so the Packers passed it. They're allowing over 8 yards per attempt, and they faced like a slate of teams missing their number one receiver. So this could just be actually a bad overall defense.
But again, only 5 weeks played and only 4 games played for the Packers. So we will find out more. All right, let's go to Sunday Night Football. The 4-1 Los Angeles Rams go to the San Francisco 49ers, a total of 51.5. The Rams are 3.5-point favorites here. Another star game here. Pat, how can we go from the 49ers getting absolutely steamrolled by the Miami Dolphins, the coach and the quarterback saying he's still not healthy, that's why he was just woefully bad in that game, to that quarterback not being on the injury report and only 3.5-point underdogs to a team in the Rams who are basically playing bully ball in 2020?
I mean, Vegas is like over and focusing on the Rams Giants game. I don't know, because it is hard to find an explanation. And I mean, I guess the good news for the 49ers is that Jimmy Garoppolo avoided setbacks with his ankle. But I mean, Nick Mullins is not the answer. CJ Beathard is not the answer. They desperately need Jimmy Garoppolo to get back healthy and to do some semblance of what he does well. But I mean, last week he wasn't hitting any of the design plays as usual, was not creating any offense by himself. It was just a truly, truly wretched performance. And yet I don't know if facing Aaron Donald in the middle of the defensive line is going to be good for the health of Jimmy Garoppolo's ankle. And just another team where the fact, I've said this about the Ravens earlier, this is kind of different situation than the Rams, but another team where I think maybe the 49ers are hurting themselves, where they don't have a settled, a lot of it's because of injury, but they still don't have a settled running back rotation. I mean, we know Raheem Mostert is going to be the feature guy in early downs, but they don't have a settled backfield. The receivers coming and going with injury, like they can't work out like the targets totem pole, like aside from George Kittle. And I feel like that is hurting Jimmy Garoppolo too. And yeah, the line though, this really caught my eye because Jimmy Garoppolo was like as bad as humanly possible. And said the only positive news was that he didn't get hurt worse.
Don't get me wrong, like Jimmy Garoppolo's only had 2 good quarters all year, so there's still certainly questions out there. But Chris Sims pointed out on the Sunday Night Football broadcast, and I think it made sense that you could even tell Garoppolo couldn't push off his back foot, so he shouldn't have been in the game anyways. No. Maybe he should never be in an NFL game. I don't know, but he was purposely.
Maybe he should have been on the injury report then.
I was going to
say,
say,
it wasn't an injury report heading into the game.
True,
it's insane.
Having said that, I do like the over in this game. I think the 49ers can put up points on this Rams defense. They 20 and 34 points last year against the Rams. And I don't think the Rams have the same defense to push back against them. I know they're moving Aaron Donald around. He himself is creating pressure while no one else is. And they're moving Jalen Ramsey oddly to the slot at times. It's just a unique defense trying to use 2 players with no other players around them. And so we know they can scheme Raheem Mostert, who came back and took over the backfield away from Jerick McKinnon. Like Mostert is practically the RB1 with McKinnon only sprinkling in on 6 fewer touches as long as Mostert's fully healthy. And Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk still fully healthy as well. So I like both teams to put up a lot of points in this game, actually.
Which running back are you using, Hayden, on the Rams?
Darrell Henderson would be
Absolutely.
my choice. I have a garbage time stat in the fantasy usage column, and both Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers, more than half of their touches came in garbage time, and Darrell Henderson, less than half of his came in garbage time. So I think that he's the guy moving forward for at least for now on running downs. The third down problem is still a major problem, but we just see the Rams, they don't want to pass the ball. They're like bottom 3 in neutral pass rate. They are not throwing the ball downfield. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, both have like 6 yards average depth of target. Tyler Higbee's not involved. So this is just kind of a one-dimensional conservative offense. There's not that much to get excited about outside of Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and then somehow, some way, Darrell Henderson.
Henderson outtouched Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers 10-1 to build that 20-7 lead. And then the other 2 came in afterwards. I still think this is Henderson's backfield.
I agree with you that it's one-dimensional, and I went on this monologue again on the Wednesday show with Pat and Denny, so I won't go through it now. But it's extremely successful, and it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's not extremely fun to watch, but I really like from a top-down perspective this Rams team this year. And I think what the 49ers and Rams last year showed is how dang difficult it is to sustain success at the top levels in the NFL, and how basically it's just the Patriots, the Seahawks, maybe a few other teams that can do it. The Chiefs now, year in, year out, the Ravens, and that's it. I mean, when you have these formulas that work in one year, like the 49ers did last year, like the Rams did a couple years ago, and then just try to bring all of those pieces back, injuries hit, player performance hits, many factors just don't align like they did in a single 16-game season. And the Rams have understood that and reevaluated that and are getting the optimal use out of their players right now. And I don't think the 49ers are at the moment because Jimmy Garoppolo. And I understand hurt, couldn't plant, all that kind of stuff. But Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Raheem Mostert, and the offensive line is not playing well. The other pieces are. But those are enough to win these football games. But if Jimmy Garoppolo plays like he did last year and plays like he has all year outside of those two quarters, this team is going in the tank.
Josh, just to build off your point, that you showed how difficult it is to win year to year when you're relying so much on scheme. And these teams that are both so scheme reliant to try to hide their quarterbacks. And the Rams are pulling it off right now. And the 49ers, they won't be able to pull it off if Jimmy Garoppolo, at the very least, doesn't get back to 100% health.
To be clear, though, last week, like the Dolphins and Preston Williams attacked practice squad cornerback Brian Allen, and McVay saw that. McVay knows. So I think Jared Goff does attack this game without any pressure.
We don't advocate for parlays, but Titans Rams sounds pretty good to me this week. All right, two more games. Not speed through them. They're important games, but we might go overtime this week. Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, 57.5 total. Yeah, 57.5 total. 4-1 Chiefs are 3.5-point road favorites here against the Buffalo Bills, who showed some chinks in the armor this week. But Hayden, can those Bills replicate how the Raiders beat the Chiefs last week? Because I would say some of the similar pieces are there to follow that same formula.
Yeah, you need some downfield passing attack, and then you have Stephon Diggs underneath as well. He's just been eaten every single game. We have to keep an eye out on the injuries. John Brown, Dawson Knox, Zach Moss, even Cole Beasley was in and out of the lineup. Those are the key pieces. Obviously, the Bills need those guys. It can't just be Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs because they're getting nothing out of their running backs right now. 28th in rushing EPA on offense. Devin Singletary's making defenders miss it, and then he just can't get upfield, and that's kind of been a problem of his for the last 2 seasons now. So there's certainly some intriguing parts. Of course, Josh Allen, he's the QB3. Last week, it was not pretty, but you have to start him in a game where this game could easily go over. We see these offenses, just their upside is through the roof, especially with the Chiefs coming off of a really no excuse loss. I would be surprised if they had another bad week. Maybe they were looking ahead. I think Daigle mentioned this before, looking ahead to this game. I feel like this is going to be the best game of the week.
You talk about watching injuries. We need to make sure Matt Milano's out here because Travis Kelce is going to have himself a day since the Bills still prefer to play nickel coverage and just allow their linebackers to cover tight ends. The Chargers and Raiders, the last two teams to compete with the Chiefs, blitz at bottom 5 rates in the league, dropping back in coverage and forcing Mahomes to check down. That's what's happened. That's what has allowed them to take the Chiefs to the very end in regulation. But the Bills, on the other hand, blitz at the league's 8th highest rate. So I do wonder if they change their coverage and to combat Patrick Mahomes. Having said that, on a short week for the Bills, I still think this is a very bad spot for Josh Allen in an island game against this defense.
Yeah, until they allowed Derek Carr to go nuclear. I mean, the Chiefs had been kind of neutralized, and they had a really good half. Justin Herbert had a really good half against them too, but have been a bad matchup for opposing quarterbacks despite kind of constant shootout game script. And you mentioned Matt Milano maybe being out again for the Bills. Tre'Davious White could also be out, and that could really wreck the Bills' game plan because, they're going to want to try to prevent these splash plays like everyone wants to do against the Chiefs. But Tre'Davious White would be a huge, huge absence. And Sammy Watkins, Hayden's boy, probably out. It doesn't really enhance Mecole Hardman's floor at all, but I think he gets the increased ceiling odds. And as someone, even at the risk of a 0, I think you really need to get Mecole Hardman in your lineup this week.
Yeah, I've gotten on some other teams this week for losing in the previous week. We'll say that the loser of this game means they're on a 2-game losing streak, which would not expect for either of these teams of how they played through the first 5 and now 6 weeks of the season. But I don't hold anything against the Chiefs losing in week 5 to the Raiders. I think that that's just a game that happens. I think the Raiders played to their potential. They played to exactly where and how they want to win. And in fact, at one point, Pat, you kind of mentioned this, the Chiefs, I believe, were up 21-10. It was basically 28-10 with that deep shot to Tyreek Hill that was called back due to penalty. I have no concerns moving forward with the Chiefs unless they sign Le'Veon Bell, because then all my Clyde Edwards-Helaire shares don't look as good moving forward. That's it.
We talked about Mahomes dumping off as well. Like, that's where Le'Veon Bell helps. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire only 3 carries inside the 10 the past 3 games, as the team has sneakily like run more fullback sweeps and like little handoffs and whatnot, like almost trying to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire away from goal line carries. So we can't pretend like Le'Veon Bell is not an issue for Edwards-Helaire. He absolutely is.
Is to say, I think if the Chiefs on Le'Veon Bell, there's going to be some Rotoworld employees having to take out second mortgages because of the CEH investments.
Well, if we don't talk about it, it won't happen. So let's just move on. Let's close out with the other Monday Night Football game, the Arizona Cardinals against the Dallas Cowboys, a total of 55 here. 3-2 Arizona Cardinals are 1.5-point road favorites here against the 2-3 Cowboys, who are now led by Andy Dalton. There is some positive Cowboys news, though. Leighton Vander Esch is expected back at practice. And on the Cardinals and Chandler Jones, their best pass rusher, will miss the remainder of the season with a biceps injury. Daigle, any chance that the Cowboys can make this one work on Monday Night Football at home?
Any chance the Cowboys are the upset of the week? Is that what you're asking? Because why, oh why, are the Cardinals favored against anyone on the road? I understand Dak has a big presence on this team, but not big enough for the Cardinals of all teams, who we still don't know anything about, to be road favorites. So now in losing Chandler Jones, they previously created the 8th lowest pressure rate with all-pro pass rusher Chandler Jones. Now they don't have him. I understand Andy Dalton hasn't been good since 2015, but he's still in the best, most talented situation since that time. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Cowboys can at least compete in this game. The Cardinals should not be favored at all. That's crazy.
John makes an interesting point. When Andy Dalton has talented supporting casts, he usually gets them their numbers. So it's not like, you have to like RIP, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb, maybe Michael Gallup, RIP. But yeah, I mean, Andy Dalton, he had some very talented supporting cast in Cincinnati, but this is probably the most talented supporting cast he's ever had. And we don't want Andy Dalton in there, but he is. And yeah, I think he can still keep the fantasy value going for the Cowboys skill players.
I don't think it's any coincidence that when Dalton was relevant in Cincinnati, their offensive lines were adequate to above average. Remember, Andrew Whitworth was there. But as soon as their offensive line became one of the worst in the NFL, his play completely dropped off. And we have seen Dak, while we thought he might be in line for quarterback 1, and he ended up being like the quarterback 4 in fantasy points per game. I mean, this offense was significantly hampered, no matter how good Dak was, no matter how good CD was, Amari, Michael Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott, because this offensive line is just an absolute mess. And while they can get by with their backup left tackle, they might not be able to get by with also their backup right tackle. And that's where they are now. And I am just terrified of Andy Dalton, who is going to be lining up behind that porous offensive line. I'm not saying that the Cardinals have like individual pass rushers that can win, but I'm sure that it's not going to take that much to scheme up some pressure against Andy Dalton here.
Hayden, hit me with the receivers. Who are you feeling with Andy Dalton under center? What do the stats, as your popping models over there, tell you?
Well, I think Amari Cooper is probably the safest and with the most upside. CeeDee Lamb, I think, looks the best of the 3 already. And I think he's like a wide receiver 2 every week just because he's getting that type of usage and he's so good. And I think he's a good fit with Andy Dalton, like Josh or everybody's been saying. Bad offensive line, you got to get the ball out quick. Who are you going to throw to? Probably your slot receiver with a sub-10 ADOT. I think Michael Gallup is still just so good, but he had a 16.9 ADOT, which just means he's super volatile week to week. Yeah. And the big kicker is 93% of his targets are near the sideline. Over the middle targets are way more valuable. So that's kind of why Michael Gallup you're getting no floor with him. The one saving grace for this game in particular, though, Cowboys first in offensive pace, Cardinals second in offensive pace. That's why I think I like the over. I think people are scared of Andy Dalton because they've seen him the last couple of years, but he's never had Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Zeke Elliott on his team, and the injuries with Chandler Jones as well. So I think that this game should go over just because of pace.
Big question. Cardinals are favorites, large total. Dallas defense, absolute trash, especially against the run. Is this a week where you can feel like playing Chase Edmonds as a running back too, even if you might not lead this backfield in touches?
I thought you were going to say Kenyon Drake. I was like, no, you can never feel good about Kenyon Drake. Yeah, I mean, Kenyon Drake's still touch-based RB2, I guess, low end. And then Chase Edmonds still there as an RB3. It's still hard to start him when it's less than 6 touches per game. But we would imagine after watching them the past few games that Kingsbury has also seen this, that Chase Edmonds is just the player that pops on film. So you would start Chase Edmonds, sure, as a flex with 4 teams on bye who have running backs that are actually very important in my mind.
He's a top 30 back this week, and there's just less and less daylight between Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake.
All right. We'll close it out there. By the way, Daigle and Hayden, Building Blocks is on Friday, correct?
It is.
What time?
6 p.m. Eastern, and rotating guest this week will be Rotoworld's own Chris Allen joining us.
Nice. Love Chris Allen. Rising star in the business.
Yep.
Chris Allen is. Again, you can check out Building Blocks on the NBC Sports YouTube channel and the replay of it as well. It's up on Twitch during that time. Okay, that's going to do it for us. Again, we'll be back Sunday, noon Eastern, Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. Join us for 45 minutes ahead of kickoff. And I always want to remind you that we'll have a game-by-game recap show that night. Yes, Sunday night ahead of your Monday morning commute to your desk from your kitchen. That is not very long anymore, but we are still recording that podcast for all of you. So go and subscribe and look out for it there. So for John Daigle, for Hayden Winks, for Patrick Doherty, I am Josh Norris. Up the Villa. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.